Hello and welcome. In this video, going to be making my mom's apple pie. Quite literally, my mom's, not doing someone else's mom's apple pie or your mom's apple pie or fancy baker apple pie. Going to be making this the way my mom makes it, so keep that in mind when commenting. Insults will be dealt with airstrikes in the true American fashion. So a pretty simple recipe. Just gonna start by peeling some apples. I have Gala apples here. My mother's preferred apple is Jonathan, and I think that is the right choice as well, but can't get those here. So we've substituted Gala apples, which I think are alright for this application. Aiming for sweetness with a little bit of tartness. Just gotta get things peeled here, and then we'll get these chopped up. My wife is the skilled baker in our home, so she will take over for making the dough. It's a pretty classic, no frills, traditional American pie. Not like American pie, just an American pie. We'll be using shortening for the crust. I know a lot of people like to use butter. Shortening is my preferred crust, and maybe partly just growing up with it. Talk a little bit more about that when we get to the crust portion. I saw someone say, I think it was on the King Arthur website, your grandma probably made pies with lard, your mother with shortening, and you with butter. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. But I do just tend to prefer the shortening crust and its properties. But I will just finish peeling up these apples so they will be ready to be chopped up. And then we can move on to the dough construction. I wanted to do something in the spirit of the 4th of July, the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, which I'm led to believe was a big deal. Alright, now I am slicing up the apples, kind of shaving off the outside into these ovalish chunks, and then sort of some random other sizes and cuts. I guess kind of a haphazard or non-uniform approach. Actually discussed this with my wife as to what shape we should be going for here. You can do a very, orderly set of slices. Guess we're going for kind of a mix. You're gonna have some larger and some smaller. So this is not going to be a highly precise cutting of the apples. But really you can do anything that you want here. Probably don't want to grind them up into a puree, but get some good chunks here. And I will say that once I was finished, my wife went through and edited a lot of the apple chunks that I had made, cutting a number of them into some smaller pieces. So this was not the final word when it came to the apple prep. But I'm just gonna make my way through the apples here, getting everything sliced up and processed to be placed inside of the crust to make our apple pie. I will say that the apples smell delicious. Some beautiful apple smells, very appetizing, nice sweet smell. Alright, just again slicing off bits here, kind of just cutting around the outside until we get down to the core. If you really want to maximize your yield, you can probably shave a bit more off those cores. Kept things pretty free form here. Alright, so got a few apples to go. Yeah, like I'm gonna take a little bit more off that one. And just get our apples prepped. A couple less desirable bits on that one. And we'll continue our efforts. Felt like it was a good approach to use some teamwork here on the pie. So my parents often do it as well. Distribute the load a little bit. It's not too hard to make a pie, but definitely some work involved between getting all the apples prepped and getting the crust made. Alright, so let's go ahead and get our apples finished up. If you have a preferred geometry of apple chunk for your pies, do let me know in the comments below. Goal here is we're going to want the fruit to get soft. We don't want to completely break everything down and have just a goo inside the pie. Alright, just about done here. Had to have a bit of a taste. Delicious. Like I said, smells wonderful. So we've chopped up all of the apples, and now they get treated with a cinnamon and sugar mix. The directions indicate a full Pyrex measuring cup of sugar. So not a 1 cup measure, but filling the cup. I'm not a fan of imprecise measures like this, but let's recognize the traditional way is folks who cook by eye, by hand, just a skill I don't have. Then we're gonna need some cinnamon, tablespoon and a half basically, and I am not a fan of other spices in apple pie. Like other people like to put some other baking spices in, but I like the simple, straightforward flavors. A little bit of cinnamon and sugar. Some folks will add a little cornstarch to help bind the liquid, but very easy for that to make a gloopy pie. Can feel store-bought. So I want things raw, pure, simple for me. Some also add lemon juice, which I don't like to do either. If you have a sweeter apple that doesn't have that tartness, then I definitely would. So you need a little bit of tartness, but I think maybe the modern palate likes tart a little bit more. I don't like things super tart. Okay, now my wife has taken over to prep the crust. So I'm gonna start with some flour. Again, not going super precise on the measurement here. Not getting out the scale. I'm gonna build up this dough from a couple cups of flour. And like I said, gonna use shortening. A tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, and a third tablespoon of shortening. And let's go 4 tablespoons of shortening. And why stop there? Let's add 5 tablespoons of shortening. Basically 6. Finishing up that can. And on to the next can. 7. And 8, 9, and 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, there we go. So a good amount of shortening and some salt. So I looked this up to learn a little bit more about shortening versus butter and how this all works. I'm gonna use the pastry cutter here to get chunks of that fat mixed in with the flour. The fat helps keep the gluten from connecting, forming longer chains, which will be tough. But you want to keep some chunks in there, help with the flakiness. Don't want to get it all fully blended, and more likely with it's warm, that'll also help develop gluten. So a lot of people, right, will use extremely cold butter, try to minimize those things. We're not hyper optimizing here, just doing a good old-fashioned approach to pie. Now I'm going to add a quarter cup of water. Again, people will often use ice water. Keep that cold temperature. Keep the fat from melting too much as you work it and it warms up. Now there's also, you can use the vodka trick. Try to get some liquid. It's not going to make the dough too tough. Yeah, never really do that though. Alright, just kind of get the dough incorporated here. Get things mixed up. Then just bring it together enough to get it to form a bit of a ball of dough. Again, not trying to work it too much. Just get it all incorporated and brought together. There we go, starting to form into proper pie crust dough. Here's a look at it. Tablespoons, about a cup, some parchment, and the dough is just going to go onto the parchment, roll it out between the layers, helps with it sticking, and it makes it easier to pick up the dough itself and drape it in the pie pan. Alright, so some sheets of parchment. You can use wax paper, and those will get hit with some flour, help in the rolling out process. And there's the ball of dough. Press it down a little bit just to start. A little press, and dust with a little more flour on top, and goes between the parchment, and then it can be rolled out into a beautiful circle for the pie. Just gonna roll it out, very simple. Along the lines of keeping things cold, it is common to chill the dough, but like I said, keeping things simple here, and still gonna get a delicious result. Using butter, of course, will give more actual butter flavor to the crust, while still it ends up nice and kind of flaky. Alright, there's the rolled out dough, a perfect circle, as you can see. Incredible. And then you're just going to trim the edges when it goes under the pan. But shortening won't have that buttery flavor, but I prefer kind of the simple taste along with the apple. But if you like that butter flavor, of course you want to get that in there. I will say we add some butter on top of the filling as part of this process, and that does bring in a bit of that butter flavor, even though it's not in the crust itself. Again, this is just how I like it. You know, you like the one you grew up with, and this is my mom's version of apple pie. If you're using butter, it's basically the exact same process, just instead of the shortening. So just trimming the excess off the edges. And you can use those scraps to fill in any gaps as needed. Like there, just press that in. Press it to blend it with the rest of the crust. Just some pressing with the hands. So we have a nice covering around the edge of the pie pan here. Get that shaped. Just pressing and pressing. And then you can kind of do a little crimp or shaping, however you like to do the edge of your crust. Just doing some pretty simple thumb presses here to shape that outside edge of the pie. Alright, and this will be our beautiful, tasty vessel for those cinnamon and sugar covered apples. A little more repair there. And here go the apples we made into the pie pan. Beautiful. Just get all those in there. We have a nice tall pile of yummy apples. Good sugary, cinnamony juice there in the bowl. You could just eat this without even baking it. Delicious. Alright, kind of get those to settle a little bit. Distribute them in some approximation of evenness. Going rustic here. Not some perfectly layered French dessert. Alright, so get those apples settled so they're all tucked in there together. And then we'll want to prep the top crust. A lot of people like to do some form of lattice. Just going for another circle of dough here, and then some fork holes for venting the steam rather than a lattice. I like the more complete crust on a pie. And same approach, just putting the puck of dough between some parchment with some flour. And just use the rolling pin to get that flattened out, rolled into a circle that we can cover the pie with. Just getting that rolled out, really just pressing it. Doesn't need a vigorous roll to get results. Just stretching that out into a disc large enough to cover our finished pie. Looking pretty good here. Don't want it too thick, so it'll bake nicely. And take off that top sheet. Alright, now this has got to go on top of the pie, so gonna flip it on there. Voila. And then just again crimp around the edges and cut off any excess dough. Just trim things up. Some delicious dough snacks. Those can be baked with a little cinnamon and sugar as well for another little treat. And again, if we need to do any crust grafts, the little extra bits work for that, to patch any holes or gaps in the pie. There we go. And then just a little bit of crimping around the edges to seal the pie in here, seal the top and bottom crust. And she's going to use a fork to finish that out. Give a little texture to the edge and press those down. It'll give it that fluted look. And then poke some holes in the top crust to let steam out, so we don't get a Mount St. Helens situation with the apple pie. And that is going to be ready to go in the oven. Before it goes in, I'm going to put a little bit of aluminum foil around the edges. That'll keep those from overly browning or burning while the pie bakes. And after about an hour or so, you can take these off and let the pie finish up. 5 to 15 minutes, just looking for a nice color on it. And there we go, looking lovely. And of course, I'm going to have to try this. I've let it sit about 3 hours or so. Let the juices kind of settle and everybody get happy in there. Probably could have waited a little bit longer, but I need to cut myself a slice here and try some of my mom's apple pie. All right. Oh, it looks and smells wonderful. Now let's dive in and give it a taste. Let's go for it. Some crust and apple. Nice and warm still. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. That is delicious. Makes me so happy. Maybe my favorite dessert. It's a classic, but always terrific. Flaky crust, nice soft apples, sweet and tart, a little cinnamon. Wonderful.